Welcome to the podcast designed to fuel your success selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are on and we are talking about security. More importantly, today is titled Shocking Security Sales Blunders. Help your customers quickly. Say that 5 times fast, will you? On with us today, we've got the wonderful, the amazing Jeff Sharon of Cenergi. Jeff, welcome on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Jeff, we're going to get to hear a little bit about who Cenergi is here in just a second, but I always like to kick this off. I want to hear everybody's life path. How did you get to this? Where did you start? Did you start out wanting to be a boat mechanic and then got into technology? Like, what's the path, man?
I love my path. It ties me back to my family. I'm a third generation plumber. And so, but I decided at a young age that plumbing was not what I wanted to do long term. It wasn't the challenge that I wanted. I loved plumbing, but there was just something that wasn't fulfilling in it. And so even though I'd got my card and I was a full-fledged journeyman, I wasn't going to pursue it anymore. So there were some life changes that occurred for me, and it got me in proximity to technology. My first taste of technology was actually sitting in a call center at one of those catalog companies, taking phone calls, selling Macs of all things. I didn't even know what a Macintosh was, but I was selling it. And then he's still a good friend today. But that company had a director of IT and befriended me over lunch in the cafeteria, and one of those, what did you do? And he started describing. I went, ooh, that sounds exciting. So he just opened the door to all kinds of things for me. Was my first business partner. And then one thing lead to another. I was educated myself as a network engineer. So, I've been in that data center. I've been doing all those whacking on the keyboard at odd times at night. But what I found interesting is that the carryover of being able to look at problems within the IT space, especially the network, it was just plumbing all over again.
There's the tie. All right.
So I couldn't believe it. It was like, oh my gosh, it was still about flow and restrictions and bandwidth and throughput, and it's just a different medium. And so all of that experience that I had as a plumber and the nuances of troubleshooting that go along with it translated directly. It's different, obviously, but it's the way one thinks through a problem.
Yeah.
It translated well.
Awesome. What's the theory? The theory, Occam's razor, right? We as technical folks tend to think this thing broke. Surely it's got to be this problem 18 layers deep. And the reality is it's probably not. The RJ45 is probably just unplugged. It's go back to the basics, right? So no, I love that. Tell us a little bit about then. All right, tell us who Cenergi is, what the business is all about, and how do we find you?
Sure. So the easy part to find us is our website. We have a fledgling social media environment, so LinkedIn is probably the only other place that you can get a hold of us, but the website is the best place. And so we, as an organization, we've grown with the market. We've adapted and adopted, and really how I have viewed my engagements with my clients. I'm a pattern individual. So when I see patterns, I begin to go, mm, that keeps showing up over and over again. And then you can't have that conversation in the middle of, dealing with your client, but you can, um, take it off line and have some conversations. Say, look, maybe we can address some of these things. It's just some commonality in some of these issues. And so, um, after almost 15 years, we've seen the same issue rise over and over again. And that issue is um, not enough people. Just isn't enough people. And I would go into, there's probably enough people. Maybe that's the wrong way. There's not enough talent cycles. That's
Yeah.
how we say it.
Yeah.
Is that um, an organization might have a very talented person, but there's only so much time that person has, or they might have a talented team, and still, it's just a continuation of that. And so what happens is everybody does their best, and as we can see over the last probably 5 to 8 years, um, uh, the bad guys have figured out that there's a weak spot in the fence.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that weak spot is directly related to there just not being enough time to get to keep eyes on things, get things done, move the organization forward. And so what Cenergi does today is that we tried our best to affect the margins of an organization's operational functionality. And we do that through providing a service which starts with a fundamental aspect of how they operate. And that is, we offer a discovery service. We discover all the assets on their environment so that we all can say, this is what we're optimizing, this is what we're building, this is what we're defending, all those types of things. And then we manage that for them. We manage that viewpoint, because it's one of those roles that, I mean, I've yet to hear somebody say, when I grow up, I want to be an IT asset manager. It's just not something that there's aspirations for. And so this is part of why, who wants that job? And no one raises their hand,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
it's assigned to somebody and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
and more times than not, what we find is that everyone knows they need that information, but nobody wants to own it holistically. And so they carve out their own little piece and they put it on an Excel spreadsheet and they track their stuff. And that's it. Well, whether you're talking business continuity or you're talking cybersecurity, that's a horrible way to manage that data.
Yeah.
And so we offer that as a service. And then from that perspective, we're in a very unique position to advise. We point at opportunities, we point at risks that we see that they may not. And we might be seeing the same thing. That's perfectly fine. But our eyes on the glass, our organization is made up of former operators. And so we look at the data in aggregate and say, that's odd. And bring it to the attention. We're not executing on anything. We're not orchestrating anything. We're not doing anything. There's other people that have those jobs. We're just bringing it to their attention. And then in those cases where maybe they have limited, or we already talked about them having limited skill cycles, but maybe they're still tapped out, but this is a priority. Then we have resources and relationships through the ecosystem that allows us to be able to engage with detail and solve some of those problems.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that's one of the things that you find as you start to get into some of these specialties like security. You pointed out, as these organizations, they don't tell you, when you're growing, you're here now, you're at a certain point now, you're at a certain size now, you need those things now. And there's also the assumption that the business leaders of those companies assume that people that they have are the people that can help them get those things done. And then inevitably, to your point, with security becomes 20% of some other person's job that may or may not be qualified. So a lot of huge value that you obviously add in that conversation, helping uncover and kind of demystify some of that.
Yeah, there's an interesting balance that has a tendency to get very much unbalanced in the early stages of an organization because of there's, they're just too small. And that is IT operations is a perfect balance between people, process, and technology. And I didn't make that up. That's everybody understands that. But as you get into your limitations of your own capability to deliver, you will lean on technology and thus you become tool centric. And oh my gosh, this nice shiny tool is going to help me be able to be more productive.
Yeah.
Well, how many times can you really say that?
Yeah.
One tool, okay, that helps. But how does the second tool help you when you've taken all your time managing the first tool? It's
Yeah.
just like it compounds. And what happens is you have all these tools that nobody uses.
Yep.
And so it drags on resources. They are, in some cases, a risk themselves
Yeah.
because the tool has too many rights.
Yeah.
so and that's one of the interesting things. And when we engage, we discover all of these things, so we get to see the history of an organization as well. Things that should have been uninstalled
Yeah.
that weren't.
Yeah.
And so why do you have 3 network orchestration tools in your environment live? You can only use one.
Yeah.
They go, wait, what? No one even knows it's there. And so it's a very interesting interaction.
So let's talk about mistakes and blunders. So I want to take a couple different perspectives on this. First, we're going to get to the customer in a minute, but you get exposure to a lot of different vendors, you get exposure to a lot of different teams, and you get to see a lot of different sales styles and things like that, right? So take this from you've seen this in so many different flavors. Let's talk about, because again, I want to call these out because I want other people to be able to avoid these. But let's talk about the mistakes of the vendors. What are some of these common mistakes that you see the vendors make in the process, and how do you help alleviate that or make that as best as you can possibly make it for the end customer?
Number one, know who you are. What I see in vendors, suppliers, however you want to call them, there seems to be there's always, obviously they're a business, and so revenue is important. Driving the number is important for them. And what I find is that typically has more of a priority than actually solving the problem. And so how that manifests is this: if I am an organization for which I provide, help desk services, and oh, by the way, that has a tendency to plug into the SOC of an organization. All right. I'm not a security organization. I'm a help desk organization that has the kind of the spirit that can help support a SOC in a couple different ways. And then I'll see them sell themselves as a SOC.
Mm.
It's like, well, you're not.
No, you're not.
Um, and so maybe a SIM management where you're looking at low level logs, and that kind of relates to, some of the help desk. But point being is that the number one thing that I see is that organizations aren't being real with who they really are. This is who we are, and we're great at this because we are all subject to meeting our clients where they're at in their life cycle, where they're at in their growth, wherever they're at in their maturity. We meet them where they're at. And if this is where we are and this is where they are, the suppliers have a tendency to say, well, we're close enough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's,
I
I
think we
think,
can do that.
yeah, I think that's the number one thing that I see, that, it's better to just say, that's not who we are. Because I think things get off the rails quite quickly because you're not able to speak to it in totality. And once you get into that conversation, you have already built up enough trust that the expectation is that you said yes. And so it better be yes. And I as an advisor who has been in those conversations before, um, that's stressful. That could ruin my relationship, the trust they have in me. And so I think that's the most difficult thing. And number two, though, there's a close second. Going back to the clients, IT organizations' propensity for tools. I love the tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that leads to a sales focus that leads with tools because they think that that's the fastest way in which to gain trust. Has nothing to do with the problem. Has no idea whether or not the tool is going to look at my tool. And I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of that methodology because it's it it doesn't take a lot of listening skills to do that. Um, I would grade somebody's listening skills if they were able to have a conversation and say, yeah, our stuff isn't right for this.
Well, and I would argue too, when suppliers say that to us, all that does is makes me want to find them perfect opportunities for them because they know exactly where they're a fit.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're talking a tool or you're talking a tool stack, say they're a managed service and they go, this is what we do, in that sense that you're unicorn hunting.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like you need to have some agility here, some
Yeah.
flexibility to meet people where they're at, because I can guarantee you, not everybody has the same stack.
Yeah.
You might have five, sixth of it, but
Yeah.
that sixth one is their orchestration environment. So
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
That's important. Yeah. No. Good. I like those. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the customers. This arguably could be its own show, I think, in just
Yeah.
things that we need to be ready for. So let's talk about, from a security blunders perspective. I know you've alluded to tools a little bit, but what are some of the mistakes that you see the actual customers make throughout the process, and then how do you intervene in that to help avoid some of those?
So we had a client who had completely uh, outsourced a portion of their cloud operations. So, and basically had their environment being hosted. That's essentially what it was. But it was Azure. So they were completely in Azure. But part of that Azure build was and they had included the Palo tie-ins into Azure. So they had a Palo environment. And um, it should have never been there. It was part of a service. So again, it was part of that stack. The client completely depended upon that supplier and this wasn't one we provided. This is what we engaged the client here at this level to make sure that those Palos were operating in best practices. And so there was and this is where the troubleshooting came in. There is these repeated instances that were occurring for which you're like, how's that even happening? That shouldn't, that noise shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's let's go through the logs again. It was so weird that they were even there, because in your mindset, you believe everybody operates in best practices.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Minimum. All right. And so we couldn't figure it out. We were looking everywhere, load balancers. I mean, everywhere we were looking to figure out where was this noise coming from. And so we said, you know what? Why don't we just look at the Palos? Let's just look at the config. Let's do a compare and contrast and see if there might be something off. Well, no one configured them. They turned them on.
That's it.
Turn them on. Got traffic to flow through them, but nothing was configured.
Well, they're Palos. It's all got to be set up already.
Exactly. I
Right,
think it should
right.
work right out of the box.
They're
And I'm like,
expensive.
and we're like, I'm not even entirely sure we want to show this. This is
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things where um, everybody means well, everybody expects well. Um, and when you don't have those cycles to do the analysis, the double checking, the the holding accountable, prove it type of
Yep.
stuff, this is what happens. Is that uh, you know there's no explanation as to why it happened, and I'm not going to go into that. But in scenarios like this, it could have been that day that that provider had their Palo engineer quit
Yeah.
or get sick and then got reassigned. Um, this was happening during COVID, so it could have been that very thing. But this happens more than it should ever happen. And is that have you fine-tuned the, the the nuts and bolts of your organization, the building blocks of your wall. Did you put mortar in it when you built it?
Yeah.
To just stack a bunch of block
Yeah.
up there.
Now you're
And
asking all the
so
questions. Yeah.
it's those things where I think for us, that's what we pride ourselves, why we go and we look at the detail at the foundational level. It's like, let's not accept everything's good. We ask simple questions like to a CISO. Do you have visibility into every asset you have in your environment live? Most say no. Most say no. And so that opens the door having a much deeper conversation. It's like, okay, well, why not?
Yeah. How do you, that's, I know everybody listening to this is going to go, but what do you say now? How do you navigate with the CISO? That's scary. I don't want to offend it. Take us through that next step of the conversation. What do you do from there?
Yeah. So we do see a small trend. The trend is um, cyber just isn't a priority yet. So a tool set that is meant for a viewpoint of the entire organization and be applied and utilized by the entire organization, all different divisions of IT. I already want to describe that. Typically will not fall in the budget of security. And therefore it's a tool they don't have. Now there are solutions out there that have been brought to bear that have, you know, tried to address this threat surface problem, visibility problem is what I'm talking to. So we don't have visibility. How can we secure what we can't see? Great question.
Yeah.
It's a great, it
Yeah.
seems so basic. It's a great question. But we when we ask them why not, it typically is there's a misalignment organizationally in regards to the priority of what that budget line item should reside. Who's going to manage it? Going back to what I was talking about. It's a discovery tool. Who's going to own this? Are you? And the cybersecurity team, we would love to.
Yeah.
Because our very being kind of revolves around this. If we can't see it, ignorance isn't a defensive position. So, I just my heart goes out to these guys, the job that they have, because sometimes they're asked to run a 100-yard dash in hip deep in mud. It's like,
Yeah.
come on, get that number under 10.
Just make it work. Make it work. Make it work.
It's just, and so, you know, I just, we're gentle, probably the
Fair.
best way.
Fair. We don't, and to your point, right? I mean, this is always a judge-free zone. I think that's the tone that everybody has to take. Is that it's hard to get people to be vulnerable, but when they realize, look, this is a judge-free zone. Everybody else is going through the same thing that you're going through. I'm just here to help you, make you look like a hero to the powers that be, and make your job easier and give you less anxiety. The walls start to go down a little bit. and that tone has to hold the whole way, right? Because we're just here to help.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The budget is always king. It is always king.
Yeah.
So, unless there was a culture, that had this foundationally, almost every organization suffers from some form of this. It is shocking yet not shocking that asset information, just where it is, resides on spreadsheets
Yeah.
to the day.
Yeah.
Giant spreadsheets, that they're referring to as artifacts. Now they might have an enterprise architectural depository. It's a spreadsheet. That's it.
It's a fancy way of saying spreadsheet. Yeah.
So I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So, those are areas where we believe that we can have impact. Those are, it's all in the margins. It's not one giant iron, you know, fix something and, have a parade because oh my gosh, we just did this.
Yeah.
It's a, it's the reverse of death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
Well, we want to provide life by eliminating those paper cuts,
Yeah.
healing those paper cuts, 1,000 band-aids, paper cut band-aids,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I might have to think of something better to say.
We are Neosporin. I don't know. Never thought I'd say that, but hey, whatever analogy it takes to get people to understand it. No, that's good. Let's talk about then, if I'm a seller in an adjacent technology, maybe I just haven't ventured down, maybe I haven't talked to CISOs, maybe I haven't stepped into security this deep yet. What steps would you give another seller to help build some of those? What are the practical steps or strategies you'd recommend to step into this more?
It's a great question. I think the first thing that I would say is, of all of the spaces that we can operate and advise and sell, okay, in general sense, cyber is the equivalent of climbing the highest peaks, climbing Mount Everest. Okay. You don't just decide to climb Mount Everest, because if you do, you're going to die. There is no other outcome. You likely will stay there, and they will talk about, hey, we found some bones 30 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
That's likely what will happen. Not just for you, but for who you engage. And that's what you need to look out for. So it doesn't mean you can't go climb the mountain, but you need to train. You need to understand what it takes to climb that mountain. You need to understand all of the intricacy parts. You need to understand SecOps in its whole. Understand how all of the tech stack works within it. And then you can have conversations around with those clients as to how they are managing that. And if you can have those you can have a peer-to-peer conversation there, then you can build trust, because there is nothing in cyber that we're doing that has anything other than starting with trust. They don't trust you. I'm trying to build trust with suppliers. That's part. It's more than half my job is to go, do I really want to make this intro?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm screening them. We're having conversations. I want to know, what do you know? How do you look at this world? And then I have a pretty good understanding of, one, whether or not there's going to be conflict, two, whether or not, that's my job. My job is to make sure that if I'm going to be a matchmaker, not to downplay it, but my mind's eye should be on marriage. If I'm going to bring two parties together and I'm going to be a matchmaker, this is for good. This is forever. And so I better be damn good at understanding both parties when I bring them together.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. All right. Final couple questions here. If we look at, I feel like I say this in every episode because it's true. but this is a rapidly evolving landscape from the customer side, from the technology and vendor side. But anything that you see from a security perspective that you think other sellers should consider over the next 12 months? Different trends, same trends, staffing? What's your thoughts?
Know that these people are stressed out beyond comprehension. And so calling them during working hours makes you a jerk. So go find out where they hang out. That's what I would say. Go befriend them. They do hang out. They do go find ways in which to relieve their stress. That probably is the most productive thing we could do, is see them as people and then meet them there. Interrupting their day, especially the doers. I mean, it's one thing talking to leadership that's a little easier.
Yeah.
You think it wouldn't be, but it is. It's easier to talk
Yeah.
to leadership. They're more available.
They lean on the team. Yeah.
Yeah. But we have a tendency to go down the totem pole and interrupt the people that are trying to get stuff done. And yeah, I don't know about you, but if I don't like being interrupted when I'm reading a book.
Yeah. No.
I'm focused. I'm
in the
into
zone.
the story. Don't talk to me. I can't imagine being in a stressful role that is, and then having somebody from the outside world say, "Hey, stop what you're doing and listen to me." Yeah. Regardless of whether you're bringing the cure to cancer, it doesn't matter. You just interrupted me. You know, it's so irritating. And so finding a different way to engage and be useful, beneficial.
Fair. Good stuff. Okay. All right. Now, pivoting a little bit here, final thoughts as we wrap this up. If I am a business owner, right, I want to talk about the actual customer. I'm a customer. I know I've got some gaps. I know I've got some things that I'm going to tackle in 2024. What's the advice that you offer me, the end customer, to consider further security measures in my environment, right? What are the kind of pitfalls, or how should I be making some of my decisions?
So first thing that I would say is, or I would ask is, are you operating from a roadmap? Yes or no? And have them define or describe that. Because it's subjective, I guess. Mm-hmm. Roadmap, but sure.
Yeah.
And then I would say, have you gone through a maturity model exercise? Basically looking at your organization from a maturity perspective, and had a keen third-party eye review that and say, okay, is your roadmap aligned with your maturity model? And the reason being is, if your roadmap is basically all a roadmap is executing on a maturity model. That's basically all it is, other than upkeep. Okay, I don't consider upkeep part of the roadmap.
Yeah.
So if you're going on that journey, are you adequate? Are you honestly moving the needle the way you're needed? Because if you are working, you have things on your roadmap that is a maturity level 3, and you're a 1.4, why are you doing that? You are misaligned.
Yeah.
And so if you can't define that, then define it. Whether you do it internally or externally. Better to do it externally because, well, you're where you're at because you're internal.
Yeah.
So you're too close to those trees to see this forest. Yeah. So it's a worthy small budget item to say, come and give me a third-party understanding of where we are at. And you can do that across all of IT. This isn't something that's just central to cyber. It can be all of IT because it's all related. So you might as well do it. But that would be my advice when I engage, is I want to know where they're at, and if all they're doing is reacting to everything, then they're probably not on a roadmap.
Yeah. I love just some of the verbiage too, just maturity model, right? Where do you think you are from a maturity perspective? I think that's great. Great call outs. Awesome. All right, man. I am out of questions. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. You dropped a ton of knowledge. Clearly, there's a lot to this, but I think you've distilled it down in a way that is going to help a lot of people. So thank you, sir, for coming on.
You're welcome. That's my pleasure.
Okay. Until next time. All right, everybody. Jeff Sharon from Cenergi. I'm your host, Josh Lepresto, SVP of Sales Engineering. This has been Shocking Security Sales Blunders.
Next Level BizTech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.